Good morning, Bill.
It was an interesting Super Bowl last night.
Was there?
The Patriots are lucky. Some people say good, some say lucky.
Well, I mean, either that or you could say maybe the coach made a mistake.
Maybe so, but you know, it is what it is, right? It is what it is.
Yeah.
So, but if it had worked, people would have said he was genius, and if it didn't, you know, it's a problem.
Some guy from Mississippi seemed to get in the way of the whole problem.
Exactly. So let's talk about the sort of the topic of the day, which is background.
Well, you know, the OCC is getting more and more interested in lenders doing appropriate due diligence on their vendors. And,
Amazing.
Yeah, and so one of the big issues right now is what do they do about the appraisers?
Well, banks are very dependent nowadays on their vendors. It did not used to be that way. Not so dependent
Right.
in years past, but the information technology that's out there is heavily vendor dependent.
Right. They used to have a lot of these services in-house, but now they pretty much have most of them as external vendors. And in particular, the staff appraiser panel that they used to maintain is diminished, and now they're relying on fee appraisers or appraisal management companies. So the problem is the lender does not want to be putting someone in a potential borrower or client's home who has is a sex offender or has a felony conviction or has some other problem.
So let's talk about background checks in general, and then let's get specific about what is a background check. When we started down this road, I thought I knew exactly what a background check was. Now, I'm not so sure.
Well, we've talked to a number of companies that provide these services, and the background check really falls into a variety of different categories. First, they look for felonies and misdemeanors at
criminal,
the county level.
right, criminal.
Well, that's just one. At the county level, felony and misdemeanors.
Okay.
All right. They look.
Are misdemeanors bad?
It depends on the lender.
So would you accept? So that's another issue. We'll come back to this. What would you accept?
Yeah, but that's different than a background check. The background check determines what is out there.
Right.
The lender then decides what is appropriate or not.
Correct.
Right?
And so so criminal.
Sex offender list. Are they on the sex offender list? Okay. They will check the National Criminal Record File.
All right, and that's federal stuff, right?
Well, it's
And states they report.
Well, no, the national looks at county, state, and federal. So that one's really an overlap, but it's a service that they provide, and it overlaps some of the others.
Right.
The other one is the federal criminal record file. And then they look at the global sanction search. So they're looking for U.S. and foreign records.
And these are administrative sort of sanctions, right?
Not necessarily. They could be on the terrorist list.
Okay.
They could be on the OFAC list.
Office of Foreign Asset Control.
Right.
Right.
And they could be on the world denial list. Okay.
I feel like that's what the airlines have got me on that, because I get denied a lot of times.
Then there's the internal ones specific to appraisers, looking at the.
Well, let's just talk about, we're still on criminal.
All right. Well, that's the end of the criminal.
Okay, so the criminal is quite expansive depending on what the lender is willing to pay for, essentially.
Right.
And we'll come back to who pays in a minute. But the criminal is one that's from today back. We also have discussed with our clients this concept of monitoring.
Right.
So you do it once a year or once a quarter, but then there's a need for a monitoring service. That's just criminal.
That's criminal. Then the other one is looking at the FHA list to make sure that the appraiser is appropriately licensed by FHA if they're doing FHA
Or
work.
approved. These are administrative kind of things.
And to see if they are on any disciplinary action by the FHA, and also ASC.gov.
All right, so that's really all under the heading of criminal and administrative. Now let's talk about civil.
None of the background checks that we've talked to have looked at any civil issues.
Although some companies do require a civil background check.
Right.
They require credit. So for example, would you, for our clients out there, do you want your appraisers to have good, however you define good, credit?
One thing they do, and I forgot to mention, is that they do a social security number check to make sure that the number that is being provided is correct, and also to check to see if the appraiser has lived in places other than the ones they mentioned on their application.
And so one of the things that some of our clients may want to know is, what about the litigation history of this appraiser?
Right.
Have civil litigation that would not show up in a criminal background check.
That's absolutely correct.
And so the third thing that we're hearing, and this is in the general realm of background checks, do they want to do an educational background check? Now the states from really 15 forward should be doing some sort of educational background check as part of the licensure process.
Exactly.
But what about the appraisers who have been previously licensed and certified? Do you want to go back and authenticate their educational background?
Right. And what we're hearing from lenders is that the OCC is not requiring all of that. They're basically just requiring sort of a one time a year.
Today.
One time a year, minimal background check. But here's the problem.
And a monitoring.
No.
No monitoring.
No monitoring.
Just a check once a year and that's it.
That's it.
Today.
And right, and it's not all the things I just listed. It's
Right.
just a very small component of that. But here's the problem. The way that many of these background check companies work is that they charge a fee somewhere between, say, $50 and $100
Right.
to do this minimal check. And the lenders typically are wanting this to be something that the appraiser pays for. So here's the issue. Now,
So we're getting down to the money.
we're getting down to the money, but I mean, here's the problem is that if the appraiser has to do that for every one of their clients, you know, that's getting hit.
We're talking about real money.
You're right. Now, there are a few of these companies who will do two things. One, for about the same price, they will do a background check that's fairly comprehensive. They will also monitor that during the year.
Right.
And so anytime it changes, they'll notify the lender, and for the one price, they'll notify multiple lenders so that they will send that report to whomever the appraiser designates.
And assuming that the appraiser has no control over that report, they can't touch it,
Right.
they can't get access to it, then that's probably okay.
Yeah, I would think so. But it's something, the problem is that the lenders are worried about several things. One, are they going to meet the OCC requirements? How are the OCC requirements going to change over time? Is the monitoring
Well, you
something
can bet
that-
that's going to happen.
Yeah, is the monitoring something that they should really be concerned about? And is this going to be too much of a burden on the appraiser?
Well, you would know, even if you did not do monitoring, you would know, but it would be a year later, and there would be up to a year later
Right.
if you did it on an annual basis. But the monitoring, I realize the institution has self-reporting on the appraiser,
Right.
But at the same time, what constitutes an acceptable background? So, for example, this is going to be an issue which lenders have not had to deal with their vendors. For example, is a DUI sufficient grounds to get you suspended on somebody's list? I mean, let's talk that through. You may not be able to drive, and that's might be a prerequisite to doing an appraisal.
Right, but on the flip side of that, you may have an assistant or your spouse who drives you to the
That's
property, and
absolutely
you may
true.
be competent to do that.
For some lenders, it may signal other things.
Yeah.
So lenders are going to have to develop their policies and procedures around what is acceptable and not acceptable in terms of background.
And the OCC has provided no guidance on this, and so they're all floundering. And so one of the things we've talked about doing is potentially trying to get all of our lenders to come to some sort of a mutual agreement
And best practices.
and best practices on that, so that they could then sort of uniformly say, okay, this is what needs to be done, and all of us will accept it if this is done.
Right, and that would provide some uniformity, some consistency, and it would also be excellent for vendors because they would know what the expectations were.
Exactly, and
Which is also a big issue.
right.
The vendors just see this as an added cost right now.
Totally, and it could be a large cost.
Right. Well, we're out of time. This is FNC's Morning View. I'm Bill Rayburn with Bob Dorsey. We hope all of you have a warm and fantastic week. Bye-bye.